Donald Trump is claiming that it's possibly a good idea to lift sanctions on Russia. Now, these sanctions have nothing to do with Russia hacking into the RNC and the DNC or possibly spreading fake news in the United States. He wants to lift sanctions related to what Russia did in Ukraine with Crimea. Now, he said the following: "They have sanctions on Russia. Let's see if we can make some good deals with Russia." Now, look, his idea is actually not all that bad. Now, first of all, whether or not you agree with the sanctions regarding what happened in Ukraine is one thing, right? I think that those sanctions made all the sense in the world. What Russia did with Crimea was wrong. So I agreed with those sanctions. Now, the reason why Trump says that he wants to possibly lift them is because he wants to get Russia to agree with the United States on, I guess, lessening their nuclear capability, okay? So he says the following: "For one thing, I think nuclear weapons should be way down and reduced very substantially. That's part of it. But Russia's hurting very badly right now because of sanctions, but I think something can happen that a lot of people are gonna benefit."
Okay, let's break that down, because he speaks like a third grader. So does Trump want to do this deal because, God, he stays awake at night thinking, we've got too many nuclear arms pointed at one another. If we just do some nuclear arms reduction. Remember when he ran on nuclear arms reduction? He doesn't care about nuclear arms reduction. And right now we've got 1,367 nuclear warheads. They've got 1,796. Our warheads are better, more modern, yada, yada. If we reduce them by 10, 20%, I'd be thrilled. That's great. That's wonderful. But that's not what Trump's priority is. It never has been. It's a fig leaf. What did I tell you? The minute he gets into office, those sanctions are gone. Because he did a deal with Russia. And I don't know if the deal was implicit or explicit. And I don't think it had anything to do with being on a bed, okay, or secret dossiers. I think it had to do with the money, Lebowski. So now, what is the money that Russia cares about? What's the money that Trump cares about? Trump apparently borrowed from the Russians, partly because no U.S. bank would give him money anymore after 6 of his businesses went bankrupt. He's a perpetual loser, and eventually the banks were like, it'd be crazy to give this guy any more money. But somehow he wound up getting money, people believe, from Russia. We can't find out with 100% certainty because he won't release his tax returns. So remember when Trump owed Wilbur Ross and Carl Icahn for not forcing him into bankruptcy, which would have destroyed him with the Taj Mahal. He later went into bankruptcy anyway, but if they forced him into bankruptcy at that initial point, he would have had no money left. So he owes everything to them. And what did he do? He put Carl Icahn in charge of deregulation, and he put Wilbur Ross as the Secretary of Commerce. So Trump does sometimes repay his debts.
Absolutely.
He's got a debt to Russia. Now, what do the Russians want? Those sanctions were crippling. That's the whole point of sanctions. He's like, oh, the sanctions have hurt them badly.
I know.
Yeah, that was their point. That was the whole entire intention, so that they wouldn't keep grabbing land in Europe and going, it's now part of Russia, right? And so they had a $500 billion deal with ExxonMobil. The sanctions stopped that deal. That's $500 billion. And what did I say? I said, it doesn't matter what the excuse is, and there's going to be some excuse, and this is an awfully weak one, right?
It might seem weak to people who are in the know, but it's not weak to American people who buy into fear-mongering. Because think about it. Americans, if you hit the right demographic and you fear-monger about nuclear weapons, they will buy it. And they'll be like, what? We're worried about nuclear weapons? We want to lessen the amount of nuclear weapons that Russia has?
No. So, first of all, if you're watching and you're already in the know, I mean, look at his comment. It says in the sentence, I think nuclear weapons should be way down, reduced very substantially. That's part of it. He didn't even say that's why I'm doing it, because I need to trade the nukes, but I'll give him the sanctions, but at least we reduce the nuclear weapons. He's not even savvy enough. He was just like, that's part of it. The other thing is I just want to help Russia. They're really hurt. You're so dumb. You're not supposed to say that. Anyway, and they're going to see through it. You know why? In the beginning, they want to give the guy a chance, but he picked Rex Tillerson as the Secretary of State. He's the CEO of ExxonMobil. So when they lift a $500 billion sanction that ExxonMobil wanted, and they put the head of ExxonMobil as our Secretary of State, it isn't subtle. And at some point, even some of the Trump voters are going to go, yeah, he had a deal with the Russians. That's the most obvious thing I've ever seen. Become a TYT member and you get all the shows on the network, including Aggressive Progressive, the most progressive show there is anywhere. Check it out, tytnetwork.com/join.